everybody, and welcome to another Tuesday night in the Spotlight. Tonight I have joining me Dorenda Sue Thomas, who's here to talk to us about her new book, What is Wrong with Me? Dorenda began as a professional human resources trainer in 2002 and has trained thousands of people to live and work more harmoniously. She loves coaching and training others and has witnessed so many beautiful breakthroughs with her students, both professionally and personally. Consumed with her own emotional pain, Dorenda took several years off, focused on herself, and learned to release the pain around memories that haunted her. After being suicidal a number of times due to her overwhelming emotions, her life today is peaceful, fun, and filled with creativity, love, and passion. In What is Wrong with Me, Dorenda shares the process that she followed to get out of an emotional pit of hell and rise. She shares stories in every chapter about experiences of abuse she has endured, how she viewed the experiences at the time, how she sees them now, and what it was that she was able to learn. Dorenda lives in Texas with her sweetheart Jessie and her kitten Beeps. You can connect with Dorenda for coaching or other questions by emailing her at info@dorendathomas.com. So thank you so much, Dorenda, for joining me here tonight.
My pleasure.
Sorry, what was that?
My pleasure.
Yes. I actually just finished reading your book and I absolutely loved it. So one thing I noticed in the book was that you share so much vulnerability. And I can only imagine how much courage it would take to share that level of vulnerability. So how did you build that up to be able to kind of put this all out on paper?
It took a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of soul searching.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that I had to share my stories. It was the stories didn't come from the book. I didn't sit down and say, okay, I'm going to write a book. The stories came when I did my own healing. And as those memories surfaced, I wrote about them, and the journaling was so healing for me. And so when I felt like that I needed to write a book, the stories just filtered right into the book.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And it's so interesting to me as I was reading the book, because the emotional pain that you experienced as a child growing up is something that I think a lot of people can relate to on so many different levels, whether it was something they directly experienced from a parent or in some other channel of their life. And yet you make it all seem so simple. The healing part, not the enduring of it. You make it all seem so simple. So how did you break it down to such a simple process for people to go through?
Well, it didn't start that way. The book looks a lot different today than it did in the beginning. It was just everything was thrown in there. And I had a dear friend who read it and helped me and said, you have to put this into a sequence that people can follow, because healing is hard. It's gut-wrenching. And you have to make it easy for them. Some of the best advice that I've ever been given, ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it came through beautifully, absolutely beautifully. Because it was almost like a step-by-step process, and really just breaking down all of the, because sometimes I feel like there's so much hoopla up here about what healing is. And it's some very basic practices.
Right. It's simple. Like we talked about before we went on air, it's simple, but not easy, and it's one of the things that I caution people about is that the exercises in the book and the things that I talk about seem really simple, so simple that, and I know this from experience from myself doing it, in books that I read, when it seems that simple, you tend to buzz right past it. You don't stop and actually do the exercises. And so I encourage people to do those exercises. Yes, they seem simple, but if you take the time to do them, they'll bring the healing.
Yeah. Now, did you always know that it was emotional abuse that you were experiencing, or was that something that came up later on in life for you?
for sure something that came up later in life. Even 5 years ago, if you had asked me, what my childhood was like, I would have told you that I had the perfect childhood. I rode bikes and big wheels and danced and, just had a blast. It was Lisa A. Romano. It was actually when I I had experienced it as an adult 5, 6, 7 years ago. Over the course of a couple of years, I experienced some traumas in life. I had a really tough situation on the job where I was accused wrongly, and my intent was so pure, but I was a scapegoat. My identity was stolen, and I actually tracked the girl down and tried to get the police to act, and they wouldn't. They said, this is just one. My father passed away, and that was super traumatic for me. And it just, it sent me into this emotional pit of hell is what it was. And so, I got to the point where I just really didn't want to live anymore. It was just, life was too painful. I didn't, if this was all there was, I'm good. I'm done. And I don't mean to speak lightly of suicide, for sure, because I've been there. I know the pain. And then I remember the day that I was at my home, and I thought about that, I don't need to commit suicide. I'm dying. I'm slowly dying. It's going to happen. And I thought, and I just started thinking about, there's people out there who are living these fabulous lives. So there's got to be something that they know that I don't. And so I'm not giving up. I'm going to reach out and I'm going to find some help. And so I had been reading probably, I knew something was wrong for a long time. I had read hundreds and hundreds of self-help books. But I finally reached out to Lisa A. Romano, who was my first coach. And I was not an easy student, for sure. But Lisa helped me to see my shame. She helped me to see my childhood for what it really was. And that, my mom didn't love me, I think on some level, she loved me as her child. But I wasn't anything like what she wanted as a child. She is intellectual and she's emotionally, she says in control, I say shut down. I was highly emotional. She was a left brain, I was a right brain, super creative, and she was analytical. And it, she just didn't accept me. And so Lisa helped me to see that I carried so much shame that not only that not even my own mother could accept me and love me. And that was the big breakthrough in the beginning that helped me to see, wow, it was it was what I was looking for. I needed that breakthrough. I knew that other people knew something that I didn't. And that was the first little shine of light that, hey, there's some help out there.
That's beautiful. And I find it so interesting when we look back at childhood. Sometimes as adults, we can go, oh no, it was good. It was, fine. Meanwhile, there's all of these inner child wounds that carry such a huge, heavy story and actually start to dictate how we're living all of our lives.
Right. Yes. Drive our decisions. I couldn't see that at all at the time, that all of that trauma and all of that pain drove. What it is it creates fear. And so that fear drives your life and drives your decisions, and yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Yes, I know.
I know you know.
It has amazed me in my own healing journey, looking at my own inner childhood wounds and stuff. And some of the most basic of experiences have created such huge stories around how I've lived my life. And it was through a lot of the same practices actually that you talk about in your book that I was able to start actually looking at and dismantling what those stories were that I had refused to look at for so long. Like you read the books and put them on the bookshelf.
Yes. Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah, I can see it clearly now. Right. In hindsight's 2020, right? And I can see it in myself, and I can see the decisions that I made out of that fear and out of that trauma. And I can see it in others now. I witness others
Yeah.
doing the same thing. I see their pain.
Yeah. Now, was that something that you would have experienced when you were a child as well, being highly sensitive and highly emotional? Were you able to sense other people's pain at that point in time as well?
I think so. I don't know that I knew,
Yeah.
but I was super highly sensitive and extremely emotional, and didn't know how to handle it. There was no emotional literacy in our house, and emotions were considered weakness.
Yeah.
And so I hid my emotions. I can remember, oh my gosh, so many days and nights burying my head in the pillow, under several pillows, to mask my cries, because I was going to face rage from my mother if she heard me crying.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just sadness, it was anger. We weren't allowed any emotions.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, has that shifted since you've done all of this healing work? Is mom more able to, I guess, be present with emotions when they're coming up?
Is she
Yeah.
more? um, I don't. I don't really think I know the answer to that question, because my mom and I do talk now, and she actually read and wrote a review for the book, and called me when she finished it. And of course, her review on Amazon is a little bit different than what she said to me. But what she said to me was, so I read it, I loved it. It's 100% true. She said, I can't refute not one point in the book. And what I want you to know is you were a pain in my ass too. So,
Okay.
the difference, I can't speak to, does she process her emotions any more differently? But here's the difference for me. Not that long ago, that would have broken my heart for my mom to say that to me after you pour your heart and soul into a book, and she calls you and said, you are a pain in my ass too. But it didn't. It actually made me chuckle, because I could see the little girl in her. I could see that had everything to do with her and nothing to do with me, and I'm sure that I was a pain in her butt.
Yeah.
We were just so different. I mean, if I was a delight, then she wouldn't have rejected me as a child.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love how you're able to shift the view on that.
Yeah.
That, okay, now I can see her inner child as well. And to witness her in that emotion that she might not be able to share, because that's a
Right.
gift in itself. Right.
But it does speak for her to say it was 100% true. Was it's maybe a tiny opening, because I do talk about her, not only her in the abuse that I suffered, but in the abuse that I'm sure that she suffered. She, hurting people hurt people. And I know now that I've done so much healing that, she hurt me, she abused me because she was abused. And, I talk about in the book that she'll never admit that. But in a way, for her to say that, she did admit that yeah, she suffered a tremendous abuse. And her father passed away when she was an infant, and she was raised by her stepfather, the only person I've ever known as my grandfather. And man, he makes her look like a kitten. He was rough.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And sometimes that pain just kind of starts to get passed down generation to generation until someone such as yourself is brave enough to go, you know what, this is where the ball ends.
Exactly. Yes.
So then when you're working with clients, because I know you do the coaching as well, so are you helping them with emotional abuse? Is that kind of what your forte is, or what is the direction that you take with the coaching?
Well, usually, people come to me, and typically it's pain in a relationship. And
Okay.
so, we boil that down to, usually what it boils down to is resistance to reality. You know, um, there are some instances where it wasn't abuse so much in relationship, but those are far and few between. But when someone, what I tell people is, I help them to see that as long as you have that pain, as long as you have that trauma, and you have these emotional reactions um, that just come from that trauma, you're gonna have difficulty in relationships, because you're not coming from your authentic self. You're coming from that pain, and so you have a tremendous amount of fear. I'm trying to come up with an example. Of course, I protect the identity and the confidentiality of my clients, with everything in me. And so I want to give you an example, but I don't want to give you an example because I don't want someone to say she's talking about me. And of course, then they think everybody knows me.
Yeah. Well, it's because when we're looking at things like abuse and trauma, it's so personal.
Yes.
And there's so much shame that's attached to what that is. And yet it's also in the sharing of that pain and in that shame and stuff that we can actually get the most healing done. So we can kind of be our worst enemies around that for sure.
Yes. And trust in a coaching relationship, trust is everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So when do you help them kind of figure out how to identify what that pain is, or do they already know coming in if they've got this kind of resistance to the reality and these issues within their relationship? Are you able to kind of hear what they're saying and then kind of go, okay, so this is actually where I think this is coming from? Or how does that process work in helping people to identify it?
Usually what happens is they want to talk about that specific issue that they're having right now in a relationship, and we will we'll identify through working together where the resistance is, but then we go beyond that, and we talk about what does this situation make you feel, and when did you feel that hopelessness, that powerlessness, that victimization, or helplessness? When did you feel that as a child? What memory comes to mind? And sometimes it takes a while, but inevitably they'll say, yeah, there was this time when I was, for instance, using my own example in the book, there was this time that I was sitting on the porch steps and watching my brother with the urine-soaked pajamas around his neck, and the shame that he felt. And, my heart was breaking, and I felt helpless to help him, as much as I wanted to, because you remember, I was that little sensitive, emotional kid, and I wanted to help. He's my big brother, and I wanted to help him, and I couldn't. And so that, that was a big trauma of my own.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, because the title of your book is What is Wrong with Me? So when it comes to people's emotions and stuff, are they often coming in and thinking that there is something that's fundamentally wrong with them? Or are they just kind of aware of there's more going on here and I just haven't been able to figure this out?
I think there is a level, where people don't feel that they fit in, where they're being rejected. And and fitting in is such a big deal in our society, you know, and I tell people, you know, it's beautiful if you don't fit in. We're all individuals, you know, and we all bring our own thing to the table, and fitting in is so overrated. So I think yes, in their core, they feel that something is wrong with them, or they wouldn't be having these issues. But what they really come with is that particular problem right here, right now. I'm in pain, and, you know, help me get out of pain. Help me solve this problem. Help me make them change. You know?
Yep.
That's what it is. Help me make them change. And so, and which is good. I mean, that's a great starting point, because they're in pain. And when they're in pain, that's great, because it's, you know, it's at the surface. And that's, you know, that's a great place to start. People who come to me and say, you know, just when it's kind of hazy and I don't feel like I fit in, their pain is still repressed. And so then we have to work at bringing that pain to the surface, you know, before they can let it go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that would be a protection kind of mechanism that they're using at that point.
Absolutely. Yes.
What would you say was the biggest epiphany for you through all of the healing and stuff that you've done? What was that kind of moment of realization for you?
Oh my gosh, there's so many.
Okay.
To choose one.
You can choose more than one too if you want, because
you know, I already mentioned the one with Lisa that I had shame, and that was paramount, because that was the beginning. To choose others, I think I don't know, Catherine. I think when I realized that I seeked out the approval of others and ignored my own intuition. And I mean, that's a big, hairy subject, because it's, you know, it's hard to rely on your intuition. Your intuition is corrupt when you're in that much pain from that much trauma. So when you try to rely on your intuition, when you're still in so much pain, it's corrupted. Yeah. And so you know, you have to get to the point where you clear out some of that pain before you can rely on that intuition and know that it's pure. And so that's a big one for me, you know, is learning to rely on my own gut, on trusting myself. You know, for all my life, I always went to everyone else when there was a decision to be made, or I just overthought everything. You know, I mean, we would be getting ready to take a vacation, you know, as an adult, and I would spend weeks trying to choose a hotel, because, you know, I was afraid that it wouldn't be perfect. And, you know, I look back and I think, you know, what was I so afraid of? And it was that approval, you know, everything wasn't going to be perfect. So that was a big one for me.
Yeah. I think that's very common for people who have suffered at the hands of emotional abuse from another person, where they have to try and be at this level. Otherwise, it's going to kind of come down on them, where they're constantly looking to make sure everything's right, you know,
exactly.
To avoid having to feel that pain.
And for me, you know, as a child, my mother raged, you know, I mean, she was scary. She was rarely, well, she was, I want to say she was rarely violent. I mean, of course, you know, she spanked us as kids, and it was, I always felt like it was over the top when I was a kid. And now that I know better, I know that it was. And even as an adult, you know, she has come at me physically. But, you know, that hasn't happened a whole lot. You know, she came at me emotionally and psychologically, and would say, you know, the things like, what is wrong with you? You know, and it was just demeaning, and it was soul crushing.
Yeah.
And why I became a perfectionist is I needed to avoid all of that soul crushing emotional abuse.
Yeah. Now, for anyone who's on here who might not know what emotional abuse or psychological abuse looks like, can you kind of give us an overview of what that might look like for someone, or specifically a child growing up?
I think, well, I think for me, emotional abuse was forcing me to deny my emotions. Saying things saying things to a kid like, "You don't really feel that way." It's uh, and that creates so much cognitive dissonance or confusion in a kid, because there's this big adult, this authority figure who's in charge of you, and they're telling you you don't feel that way. Well, you do. You do feel that way. And so you learn from those messages that your emotions are wrong, and to shove them down and don't listen to them. That they're, and of course, all my life I was told that anyone who is emotional is weak, and they're going to be preyed upon, and they're going to be a sucker, and they're going to be conned. And what I know now is that anyone who is not in touch with their emotions are the people who are going to be preyed upon and victimized. But going back to your question, what is emotional abuse? It's just, and I think in healthy families, children's emotions, how they feel, are validated. Their emotions are validated, and they're taught emotional literacy. I'm amazed now that I've gained a lot of emotional literacy, that not only can I, when I'm disturbed in some way, feeling some emotion, that I can sit down and just ask. I just get quiet and I go inside and I'm like, what am I feeling? I'm feeling sad. Of course I'm feeling sad. That situation, would create sadness. That's a normal reaction. And then I can identify that specific physical feeling in my body. Elation is a tingle, and heartbreak is heavy. Sadness is kind of a sort of a dull ache. And so I've gotten to the point now where I can feel the physical sensation and know, oh, I'm feeling, overwhelmed, or I'm feeling excited.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
That is awesome. Because I feel as though once we can identify what the emotions are, and even how that sensation comes up in the body, in the moment that it's being triggered, it's like, oh, there's sadness. Yeah. I'm going to go see sadness now, and just befriend it and just love on it for just showing up and being what it is.
Exactly. Instead of pushing it away and shaming yourself for feeling sad, and then thinking, I shouldn't feel sad, I've got it better than so and so, or and I did that forever. I shamed myself for my emotions, just as I was taught to do.
Yeah.
And now I honor it, and I'm like, yeah, I'm sad. I'm really sad, and it's okay, and I just let it be there, just like you said. Yeah. And that is. You asked me earlier, what are the biggest breakthroughs that I had? That's a huge one. That may be the biggest one.
Yeah. It's hard to say, right? Because there's so many different moments that all make up the whole picture.
Right. Exactly.
And I just want to add in too, I was just having a conversation with a mom friend last week, and there was like this possibility of her kids' hockey being canceled. And she was like, this was like her breaking point during this whole COVID thing, because it's what her kids love. And she's like, I know there's people who can't buy food, and there's people who can't, afford the housing and all of this stuff. She goes, but this is my breaking point. She goes, it's such a first world problem, and I shouldn't even feel this way. And I was like, whoa, No, it's okay. If this is your thing that's going to break the camel's back, then let it break the camel's back, you know? But I feel like this is something we often do in society as well, is we look at everybody else's situation and then tell ourselves, no, this is a first world problem, so I need to get over it, you know, rather than just accepting, I feel really upset about this. So now we know this is something that's a high heart calling. It's really important to you, you know, there's a reason that you do it, you know?
Right. And no need for shame. Shame accomplishes nothing. When we push it away and say we shouldn't feel that way, that's shame, just pure and simple, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
My kitty has decided to join us.
Oh, wonderful.
He's standing behind the camera. He may make an appearance.
He can be in the spotlight too. I think that's awesome. So, when people sign up to work with you then for coaching, is that like a one-off thing, or do you have like a whole line of different options that they can choose from? Do they work with you for a year, for a couple of months? What does that process look like?
It's very individual. And it is right now it's one-on-one. I'm designing a program. When I was an HR trainer, I was also an instructional designer. So I designed and wrote the training programs. And so I'm designing one now to accompany the book, but it's not complete. And so right now it's just one-on-one, and it's very customized to their needs and their wants.
Awesome. That's beautiful. So, because we've talked about kind of those big epiphanies and stuff, when it comes to the different things that you worked on to heal yourself, so I know you talk about gratitude and you talk about meditation and being in silence and all of these things, what would you say was the most powerful for you, or the one that helped you kind of get to a point of healing as you were going through this journey?
Probably, I mean, gratitude is such a big thing. And so I hate to put it second, but meditation is the thing. You know, meditation for me was the key, because our minds are just so busy, so cluttered with all of the should have, could have, you know, all the expectations of society, all the pressures from our family, all the pressures from our jobs, and all of those thoughts just you know, I heard a statistic that we have like 60,000 thoughts a day. I don't know where I got that from, but it sticks in my mind. Anyway, and I just had to really quiet all of that. I had to quiet my mind and learn to listen to my intuition and listen to my soul, and you know, and be able to dissect it all. To you know, I talk about in the book, you know, that I would get out and I would have conversations with people and I would listen for the judgment, you know, and I got to the point too where in meditation, you know, my mind would be swirling and I could hear the judgments in my own mind, you know, and I got to the point where I could say to myself, that was a judgment, you know, and that doesn't belong to me. That was given to me by someone else, and I can let that go, you know. And it's in letting go of all of the beliefs and all the expectations and all the pressures that are put on us. You know, beliefs beliefs are such a big deal, and we don't, you know, it's interesting when I talk to clients and I tell them, you know, that's a belief and you can let it go. And you I almost always get that deer in the headlight look, you know, and I, you know what I'm talking about. And it's so foreign to people that they can let go of a belief or even just a thought, you know. And of course our thoughts lead to our beliefs. A belief is just a thought that you think over and over long enough that it becomes a belief, you know. And I can't even remember what your question was now.
I'm asking about what would you find to be the most powerful part of the healing? And you were saying meditation. You were putting gratitude
Right.
in a close second.
Yes, definitely gratitude, close second. But yeah, letting go of those beliefs and the thoughts, I think, was number one for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And can you talk a bit on the gratitude and how that helped with the healing?
I can. Gratitude came later for me. After I quieted, a whole lot. I can't even remember when it was that I started practicing gratitude. But probably on my walks. Um, I'm sure that I heard it from a coach at some point, and I believe I started practicing gratitude when I would be out on nature walks, and I would just be grateful for the trees and the flowers and the bees and the butterflies and um, I'm, like I said, I'm not an analytical mind. I get out, there's some people that love to go in nature and they want to talk about, they want to study the trunk, or the leaves, and they want to talk about the science of it all. And um, I'm all about the nature. I'm all about, I'm thankful for that beautiful tree, the majesty of that tree and the shade that it provides. And I think that's where my gratitude practice started. And then of course, I love Brene Brown, and she talks about gratitude. And, she says, probably that maybe that's what it was when she said that of all the people that she has interviewed and studied, that no one who experienced true peace and joy, I believe is what she said, what wasn't nobody who experienced that did not have a regular gratitude practice.
Mm, that's huge.
Yeah, it is huge. And now I practice gratitude a lot, and the thing is, when you first start practicing gratitude, usually you're like, okay, I'm gonna start, and at the end of the day, I'm gonna have a little notebook by my bed or on the kitchen table, and I'm gonna write down 3 things that I'm grateful for. Okay, I'm grateful for my car and my house and my spouse.
Yeah.
Then usually the next day it's like, I'm grateful for my my car and my house and my job. But now, I have a really deep gratitude practice where I really, really take in and feel that physical sensation of gratitude, and I look around, especially, and I love to practice gratitude often, but especially when I'm in pain, or if I'm in a situation that's troubling, or when I'm feeling fear. um, I love to really just look around me and think, wow, I really am so thankful for this chair that I'm sitting on. And then I'll pause, and I'll really in my chest feel that gratitude, and I think that's where the magic comes from. I don't think it's great to say, yes, I'm grateful for my house and my car and my job. Um, but feeling it, I believe, is where the real magic is, really taking it in.
Yeah. And I think in the process, as you're saying, of when you're in pain and you can find gratitude just for the chair that you're sitting in, that's huge. Because a
Yes,
lot of times when we're in pain, we're in so much resistance to whatever it is that we're experiencing in that moment.
right,
So to be able to kind of bring yourself out of it and find gratitude, that's got to be a game changer.
right. That's where the peace comes from. Yes. And it doesn't necessarily solve that problem in the moment, but it gives you a moment of peace. And that, for me, that peace gives me clarity, or gives me a little bit of clarity about the situation. And then I can start working my way out of that pain or that fear or whatever it is that I'm overwhelmed by. That's the release.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And then what about forgiveness? Has that been something
Yeah.
that's come up for you? Was it something that you struggled with, or what did that look like?
for most of my life, I struggled with forgiveness. I didn't understand what it was. I saw a question that a lady asked today on a forum, I think. And she said, in order to forgive someone, do I need to tell them that I forgive them? Is it something that that I need to go and do? And it made me chuckle because, I have asked that question. Goodness knows how many times I've asked myself that question.
Yeah.
But I finally got a grip on forgiveness when I heard someone say, we're all doing the very best that we can right now with what we have to work with the information, with the resources, with the beliefs, with the thoughts, with everything that we have to work with. And that's not only true right in this moment, but in every moment. So, we look at our past and we have all of these regrets. And we also have all of this blame and all this anger and all this rage at other people. But once I was really able to take that in and really, with everything in me, take in that every single one of us is doing the very best that we can at the time with what we have to work with, I was able to forgive. I was able to forgive other people, and I was able to forgive myself, But to me, forgiving yourself is harder than forgiving other people.
Yeah. Yeah. We tend to have a much higher standard for ourselves than what we do for what everybody else's behavior is.
Exactly. Yes.
It's interesting too. When I was in high school, there was a girl that a lot of us made fun of behind her back. And when we were out of high school, I was working in a local restaurant, and she was actually dating one of the chefs. And I got to know her, and she was a really super sweet girl. And I felt like such a jackass for the things we had said about her behind her back. And one night, I finally worked up the courage to apologize to her for not being so kind to her and wishing that I'd gotten to know her better. And she was like, "You were always one of the nicest girls to me. You have nothing to I have nothing to forgive you for. You were always so nice." And I was like, well, Christ, if I was nice, then how awful was everyone else? You know,
Right.
but
Yes.
my own guilt that I held towards it, and she had a totally different perception of what that reality was, which was really eye-opening to me, because sometimes I think we think we've been these horrible people, but other
Yes.
people, they've just let it go. And at the same time, sometimes we hold on to this anger towards other people, and they have no remembrance of saying or doing whatever it is that we're angry about.
Yes. I've experienced both of those. Yes, for sure. I love that.
So yeah, when it comes to actually talking to people about, I forgive you, sometimes I wonder if it is just completely unnecessary to actually say those words to a direct person, to say, I, forgive you, because most likely they have no idea what we're talking about. It's us that's carried that pain with us for so long,
I
or the
agree.
guilt.
Yeah, right. Unless they're actively, asking for your forgiveness.
Yes,
You
yes, exactly.
know,
So one question that I ask for all of the speakers that come on in the spotlight is, if you could share one piece of wisdom with the world, anything that you think the world absolutely needs to hear right now, what would you want the world to know?
oh my gosh, that so many come to mind. Probably,
You can say all of them.
that you're perfect, just like you are, and it's to stop rejecting yourself. Someone taught you to reject yourself, and stop it. you know, it's yeah. Just don't take in those messages. You're perfect, just like you are, and you're lovable, just like you are. Forever I thought that I wasn't lovable, and you know, um, and I worked so hard to earn people's love, and I don't do that anymore. I mean, I really, I mean, it sounds arrogant to say it, but I truly believe that I'm lovable just as I am, and everybody else is lovable just as they are, and you don't have to earn it. And if other people are rejecting you, it doesn't have anything to do with you. They're meeting some need of their own. Maybe they're rejecting you because they feel like if they reject you, then other people won't reject you. Or other people won't reject them. I remember talking to a little boy do we have time? I know you asked me for a simple sentence and I'm going off on a tangent.
No, it's okay. We've got about 15 minutes, so you keep going on. I love this.
I remember talking to a teenager who was a neighbor, and he was just heartbroken. And he was saying, some of the boys on the basketball team, he was not on the basketball team, but he really wanted to be friends with some of these guys on the basketball team, and especially one guy, and the guy was rejecting him. And I explained to him, when someone rejects you, sweetheart, it has to do something. It almost always has a lot more to do with something outside of you than with you, if not always. I explained to him that this guy was meeting some need that probably, the guys on the basketball team were in their ego, and he was afraid that if he befriended this fabulous teenager who wasn't on the basketball team, that he might be rejected by his teammates. Yeah. And so, and I could see the relief in this kid's eyes that it didn't have anything to do with him, that he wasn't a reject. He felt like a reject.
Yeah.
And and I know that feeling.
Yeah. Which I think is so beautiful that you're able to have this conversation with him and just to bring that relief. And I think so many people need to hear that too.
Yeah.
That there's nothing inherently wrong with any of us.
Right. Exactly.
Beautiful. Do you have anything else that you'd like to share with us tonight, Dorenda?
I don't think so. You've been really thorough, Catherine. Yeah, I just, if people read the book, I just, I can't, I've had several conversations today with people who talk about, that they love the book, and, and it's an easy read. So it usually takes, a couple of hours to read it. And I love to hear that, because it encourages people to get the book and to read it, because, so many people say, I don't have time to read a long book. But more than anything else, I want to encourage people to do those exercises. They don't have to do them all at once, but just begin, just start doing those exercises, and that'll help you to release your pain, and it's not, I went back and I read my journals after I had come through so much healing, and I was amazed at how quickly I got relief. And I started putting puzzle pieces together. In other words, things that had confused me and confounded me all of my life. As I started to heal, I wasn't but a few weeks in. According to my journal notes, when I started, some of those things that were so confusing to me started to make sense. The world started to make sense. Society started to make sense. I started to see, why things happened, or what took place, what was really going on. Just the world started making more sense to me. And so, that's what I want to say, is that it doesn't take long to start feeling a whole lot better.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Dorenda, for joining us here tonight. For everyone who's watching, you guys can get Dorenda's book, What is Wrong with Me? Healing from Emotional Abuse, or Finding Hope and Healing After Emotional Abuse. It's available on Amazon.ca as well as Amazon.com. Is there anywhere else that it's available right now, Dorenda, to purchase from?
That's it right now.
Okay, perfect. We've got people asking. So Yes, amazon.ca or .com. I got mine off .ca. So, and yeah, it is such a perfect read because, as you said, it doesn't take long to read. And sometimes books are a little intimidating, you know?
Right.
And because, and when I say simple, I don't want it to sound like this is stupid or this is dumbed down or anything like that. It's very intelligent content that's broken down in such a simple way that makes it accessible for everybody, you know, where
I
they,
love the way you said that.
what's that?
I love the way you said that. That yes, perfectly stated. Thank you. That's the feedback that I'm getting as well.
Beautiful. So then, you know, that's the truth. You know, if everybody's going, this is the way I'm receiving it, it's beautiful because it's a lot of times with a lot of the self-help books, there's so much content and there's so much stuff. And I know I've read some books and went, well, God, now this is like a whole to-do list of what I need to do now, you know, and then it just kind of go on the bookshelf and collect some dust and whatnot. And this isn't like that. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dorenda. And if anyone is wanting to connect with Dorenda, you are more than welcome to message her at info@dorendathomas.com, or you can visit her website at Dorenda. Is it dorendathomas.com for the website as well?
Well, I'm still working with the tech. I'm not a techie. I'm not a science kind of gal. And so it's really best right now. I have an author page on Facebook.
Okay.
And so, and the Facebook links are long. You know, if you get the book, the link is in the book, or you can just Google my full name, Dorenda Sue Thomas, and it pops up the Facebook page, my author page.
Perfect. I will actually grab that link after we're off of here because I just opened up the book and I was like, yeah, that is really a lot of fun. I won't read that out. So yeah, I will grab the link and I'll throw it up in the comments as well. That way people have access to be able to connect with you.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Dorenda, for joining me here tonight. Next week, we have Christine Ball joining us again to talk to us about healthy breathing during these winter months. So I hope that you guys are all able to join us again. Thank you, Dorenda. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you, Catherine.